After 10 years of poor decisions by this Liberal government, you would think that they couldn't embarrass Canada any further, and you would be incorrect in that assumption. Welcome back to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. MP Anand, the Innovation Minister, accompanied by the Finance Minister, MP Champagne, took Canadian tax dollars on a jet down to Mexico City to make a big publicity stunt about sitting down with the Mexican president to talk about, I don't even know what. I'm not too sure that the Mexican president has anything to talk to Canada about that's not already covered in the USMCA. What I need you and I as Canadians to see is not only did they take this jet down there with then a second jet to follow them with the cars that transport them around, they tried to do it around Donald Trump, right? And here's the problem that it lays bare the problem that I've been trying to get everybody to understand. The Liberal Party does not possess any diplomacy. They don't have any diplomats. There's nobody in their party or in the caucus that has the ability to talk to somebody that doesn't agree with them 100%. Nobody on the far left can talk to people that don't agree with them 100%. And remember, in the mindset of the left, there is no center. There's only the left and the right. So everybody in their mind is far one way or far the other. But appreciate that the diplomacy shatters, to appreciate how many times you've heard the left wing get mad at their own because they took a different position on a certain subject, though the rest of what they believe they agree with. But because of this one descending idea, they turn against that person wholeheartedly 100%. I mean, Elon Musk is a great example, who believes in free speech. So they said, "That's it. You're out of the club, Mr. Musk." This is the same thing that we can see, right? This is why there is no diplomacy in the Liberal Party, because they can't talk to countries and companies that don't agree with them. They can only sit down and talk to people who 100% agree with them. So they have no trouble at all making a deal with China, but they can't talk to the United States is a great example. Now, because Donald Trump so what we see here is the Liberal Party trying their best to gang up on the United States. First, it was, we're going to go to Europe and we're all going to stand tough against Donald Trump and it's only going to be 4 more years. Then Europe signed deals so fast. Then he said, no, well, we got Malaysia. Don't you worry. And they're like, no problem, except we'll call you back when we get done signing this deal with Donald Trump. So now obviously all of that is whittled away, but because they have only one form of politics, because they think that by ganging up on you, somehow that makes them correct, they went down to Mexico to try to convince the president of Mexico to gang up on Donald Trump. Now, I hear many of you out there saying, yeah, well, he gave them a 90-day reprieve and he didn't give us a 90-day reprieve. And there's a good reason for that from Donald Trump's position. There's a good reason for that from where the United States is standing. Nobody wants to consider that. We all want to make it seem like we're having reciprocal trade with Mexico and Canada and the United States. Unfortunately, that's not the situation. Much of the trade negotiation as it pertains from the Canada side is on the inbound. Whereas on the other side between Mexico and the United States, it's a back and a forth. And Mexico, for all you think Southern Ontario has automotive plants, Mexico got way more, or at least larger and newer ones. So the significance of the auto industry in Mexico is something that we have to consider. Now, do we believe for 1 second that they're worried about sending American dairy into Mexico? Not me. Do we think that they're trying to send them American food down into Mexico? Well, I'm sure there's 15 guys just living in Texas who got all kinds of Mexican-style food they can ship down there. So I don't know that it's the same problems. What I do know is, on the one hand, he made Canada have to pay right away instantly. I know that on the other hand, he gave Mexico a 90-day reprieve. And I know that if not all 3 parties agreed to the renewal of the United States or the CUSMA agreement, then it falls to pieces. Here's some of the coverage of this embarrassment to the Canadian diplomatic approach to the world. Reuters is reporting that the Canadian minister hails productive Mexico meeting as the U.S. tariff loom. I don't understand why they would call it productive when they came away with nothing. Nothing has changed, no alteration. So where's the productivity exactly? When are they going to get it into their heads that everybody wants to do business with the United States and nobody wants to do business with Canada? On the other side, when the Mexican president was asked, they said there's no need for a bilateral trade deal with Canada. Of course, there's no need for that in her mind. The president of Mexico is a woman, because she has all of her plate filled with a trade deal with the United States of America, the largest consumer country on the face of the earth. Now, does Mexico have other trade deals? Absolutely. Do they want to sit down and hammer out a deal separate from the Mexico, U.S., Canada agreement? I doubt it. As I said, really the only thing that comes out of Mexico into Canada is a lot of produce, and what goes from Canada into Mexico stops and gets manufactured in the United States and then gets sent into Mexico as made in the USA, except for, of course, the people that are traveling to Mexico on vacation. I suppose that's an interesting, there's probably a lot of tourist dollars from the Mexican standpoint, but otherwise, why would they risk upsetting Donald Trump by hammering out a bilateral trade deal with Canada? And more importantly, why would the Canadian government go down there trying to hammer out a bilateral trade deal with Mexico when we already have a trilateral trade deal with Mexico called CUSMA? So why do we need another one? The answer, of course, is that we do not need another one. And that is why the Mexican government has decided to forego any bilateral trade deal with Canada, which, of course, again, removes one of the underpinnings of the Canadian position. Because they really believed in their far left mentality that they would be able to get together and sort of bully or force Donald Trump to be intimidated by the fact that there's two of them and only one of him. Of course, if they were to take a 5-second look left or right, have any situational awareness at all, be just, a little bit aware of the tone in the room, they would see that Donald Trump actually has hundreds, and it's just Canada that's the only one all by themselves. And of course, Canada's all by themselves for a couple of reasons. Now, I said from the beginning, I'm not 100% sure that Mark Carney is trying to make a deal with the United States. It could be that he's trying to manufacture a crisis so that he can impose the government on Canadians. That's not outside the realm of possibility, and it's not outside the realm of, that's happened many times. Of course, luckily for us, we have the Americans that will come in and bail us out if Mark Carney ever did try to overstep those bounds. But he feels that if he can get somebody to get on his side, he can then turn to the voting public, which is probably more accurate in my mind. They can turn to the voting public who's, despite what many of the polls are trying to say today, who are moving away from him rapidly, who are telling themselves, you know what, maybe I should have voted for the NDP. Who are telling themselves, you know what, maybe the guy that owns the house and travels to Florida for 6 months a year didn't know what he was talking about. Because here we are coming into the fall. I'm looking at going back to school. I just spent my whole summer without a job. I'm struggling left, right, and center. And Mark Carney can't even hammer out a deal with Donald Trump. Of course, from Donald Trump's position, he doesn't need a deal. That's what nobody wants to look at. He can make a bilateral trade agreement with Mexico and leave Canada right where it is. And the CUSMA agreement gets renewed in July. I believe it's July 1st, but it could be June 1st, which is even worse, 1 month sooner. So what I don't know at time of recording, and I'll look it up because it just occurred to me, is what is the timetable on the World Trade Organization? How long will it take to get somebody in front of the court, right? A complaint. So because then Donald Trump can just say in February, if it takes 6 months to get in front of the court, he can say in February, well, I'm no longer going to honor the USMCA. And now all of those 85% of products are going to get tariffs coming into this country. And our country, of course, will then be begging for entrance. We'll take 51. You'll hear all over the place because that will destroy our economy. And then, of course, the Liberal government will say, we'll just sue you in the court of the World Trade Organization. And if the World Trade Organization has a backlog of 6 months, it won't matter because by the time we get to the 6-month date, the CUSMA agreement will have expired. So I don't know. I'll look into it and figure it out. I just wanted to say that because it popped into my head. What I can say with certainty is that the diplomacy of Donald Trump is working out a deal with the Mexican side of this conversation because the Canadian side of the conversation doesn't possess any diplomacy. Think of all of the things that the Liberal government has said about Donald Trump over the last 5-6 years. Never mind when he was president, and never mind now that he's president. Think of all of the things that he said during the campaign trail and all of the times that he has flown his jet, our jet, around the world trying to turn all of those countries against Donald Trump. Do you for 1 second believe that if it was reversed, Mark Carney wouldn't hold a grudge? That if it was reversed, you'd believe that Champagne wouldn't be running up and down the country saying, I'm going to show them? That's just not the personality that we're dealing with. Because again, they have no diplomacy, so they're taking everything personally. They don't realize that it's about me and you. They don't really care. Trump has a motive. He has a goal. Our country, however, was relying on status quo. And now Mark Carney is right at this horrible position where to fix the country, he has to copy whatever Pierre Poilievre said, because Pierre Poilievre knew from the very beginning, all of us on the conservative side of the aisle knew from the beginning how to solve this problem. And if you didn't know how to solve it, all you got to do is see what Donald Trump was doing. And as he's solving the very same problem, you will see how we don't hear the liberals standing up and saying, oh, no, the whole world is having an economic problem. Now they're just saying, oh, we're going to fix it. Don't worry. Just give us another 4 years. Because Donald Trump has already fixed the problem. He's already revitalized the American economy way more than Joe Biden did in 4 years. What we have to see here is just that this was a very immature approach. Childish is the only term that I can think of. To say, well, we'll go down and get Mexico to be on our side and he can take his 90 days and blah, 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 blah. And Mexico looked at us and said, thanks for stopping by. Have a good time. Don't forget to write. And they went about their day. They went back to the trade negotiations that they're having with the United States, because the United States is not worried about Mexican timber, for example. And they do manufacture a lot of automobile parts in Mexico. And of course, Mexico is relying heavily on the American security system to help them root out much of the crime and the what we'll call cartels. From all accounts, they're sending them back by the dozens, having them arrested, like capturing them in on that side of the border and then bringing them back for justice in the United States. Do you believe for 1 second that that's not a group of tier 1 operators who are all being paid for and funded and supplied by the United States government? And why were you, if you were not on the Mexican side of the border, would you not want help cleaning up those cartels? Of course, when Donald Trump brings that up, those same cartels that are operating out of Vancouver or operating out of other regions of this country, Mark Carney says, oh, no, it's just 1% and you're overreacting. And Donald Trump says, okay, that's your position. And he just doesn't return his phone calls. Because that's the mature, diplomatic way to deal with things. You don't run around trying to make deals with the guy's trading partner. Like, it's childish, it's immature, and it is not anywhere near what we need to solve the problems that are plaguing this country. And as I told you all when Mark Carney got elected, there's no way in the world that they are going to be, the Liberal Party and Mark Carney are going to be able to fix the problem, because they are the ones that started the problems. We didn't have these problems before the Liberal government came on the stage, and now they're everywhere. All right, you can let me know what you think down in the comments. I would encourage you all to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this channel with all of your socials. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.